Good morning, guys. Happy Easter Monday. And I'm handing over the conversation to you now.
Good morning, Veronica. Happy Easter to you. Happy Easter Monday to you.
Exactly. on the roads to Galilee.
I thought we have gotten there already.
No, we're on the road to Galilee.
All right.
So how did it go over the weekend?
Well, it was quite a quiet one for me because it's a time of deep reflection for me. You know, I mentioned earlier when I said you have to think about the reason for the season, exactly. The reason for sacrifice, love. Love is the ultimate, and that is what Nigerians have to imbibe, because I think that is where you get to see all this conflict here and there. So that the spirit of brotherhood, the spirit of love, and the spirit of sacrifice are lessons that Nigerians have to imbibe, you know, to see a change. Yeah. So I think they should take a cue from, you know, the Easter celebration. It's not just about eating and drinking. Also think about the lessons and also a time for deep reflection. And
even the eating and drinking was an opportunity for Nigerians to unwind despite the challenges.
And bond with family. So
yeah. Okay, let's give you what we have today. Thanks everyone for joining us on this Easter Monday morning. We are live from our Abuja studio. Now, let's begin by telling you that the United Nations is streamlining its operations in Nigeria and some other 8 countries as part of a global reform agenda aimed at enhancing efficiency, responsiveness, and impact, and made significant reduction in funding from the United States. Nigeria's Minister of Humanitarian Affairs and Poverty Reduction, Professor Nentawe Goshwe, disclosed this during a validation workshop on the Anticipatory Action Framework for Nigeria, held at the National Counter-Terrorism Center, Office of the National Security Advisor, Abuja. According to him, the UN Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator, Mohamed Fall, had informed him about the decision.
Professor Nentawe, who decried the impact of flood disasters and insecurity on Nigeria, commended the UN for its interventions in the country, especially its humanitarian support in conflict-affected northeastern states. He described as unfortunate the decision by the UN to scale down operations in the face of daunting humanitarian challenges still experienced across the country. And to take the conversation further, we are being joined by a political analyst, Jide Uju, and he's here with us in the studio this morning. It's good to have you on the program this morning and in our studio.
Thank you very much, Jesse. It's my pleasure.
You're welcome. So let's go straight into today's discussion. The UN is cutting back on humanitarian support to Nigeria, and this could worsen crisis in states like Borno, Plateau, and Benue, especially with threats of flood looming. What kind of response would you say you expect from the government to fill in these gaps?
Thank you. Happy Easter, Nigerians and the global community. It's a very sad story. It leaves a sore taste in the mouth that it never rainbow pours, you know, as they say. Just a couple of months back, we had U.S. President Donald Trump freezing USAID funding globally. That impacted negatively on us to the extent that the federal government of Nigeria had to put 200 billion in the budget for 2025 to offset the salaries and allowances of health workers who are being paid with USAID funds. Now, this is another shocking news. We do know, despite the criticism, that the humanitarian community, the global community, has played very key role in offsetting the larger chunk of the cost for humanitarian aids. Even before we had Boko Haram insurgency way back in 2009, they had been in the country. The Red Cross of this world were there. They were there during the during our civil war. The Red Cross and other humanitarian organizations play very critical role in providing succor, you know, providing food, Medicare, and all of that for victims who are, you know, victims of the civil war That was even in the 60s, the 67 down to 70. And before then, they've been in existence. Red Cross has been in Nigeria for over 100 years. And there are so many other humanitarian aid organizations that are not as popular, but which has been operating. So you now have this, I have worked for a UN organization. And I do know that nothing lasts forever, you know. It's about availability of funds. Yeah. Now, this is not about a country-specific target. This is targeting the entire humanitarian support globally. They are reducing their staff by 20%. That's about 500 out of 2,000 something, several thousands. Then beyond that, it's also nine countries that have been affected by the withdrawal of humanitarian aid. So it's not like Nigeria was specifically targeted for any political reasons. We need to put that out there. It's not like they singled us out for this. It's not a punitive measure. But the reality that stares us in the face is that the UN is made up of about 179 countries. Funding has always been a challenge for the UN, just like for African Union, just like for ECOWAS, because they are funded majorly by member states. Exactly. And so if member states are not paying up for whatever reasons, which could be political, which could be their own domestic challenges that they are facing, who wants to go and collect money from Russia when he's having a battle of his life with Ukraine? Who wants? How can Ukraine even donate to UN? How can Syria? How can Somalia? How can South Sudan? How can Congo DR? These are conflict-prone countries that themselves are fighting the battle of their lives, existential security challenge. No. So it's what it is. We have to just adjust ourselves.
Yeah, the need to adjust ourselves now is critical because we don't know how soon it will improve, if it will ever improve. I mean, funding. Now, what can we do? I mean, the Nigerian government to ensure that the gap is not seriously filled. Last week we had the NEMA representative on this platform to talk about what they are doing. But one challenge also he mentioned is fund is not always available. We have the Security Trust Fund in Lagos, for instance, that's been very successful, getting the private sector to participate. Is it possible we begin to open up and get private sectors to participate in humanitarian services so that we don't have this serious backlash?
It's one of the pathways to bridge the funding gap, but even the private sector is crying. The rising cost of operational cost has been huge, because the private sector you want to go to themselves are facing an existential problem. I don't want to mention certain brand names, but you know, the reason why there are tariff increases on telecommunication is because they are also recording losses. Is there a company that is recording loss that you want to come and contribute to? And they are already contributing to tertiary education. You know, the TED fund is also drawing, is it 1% or 2% from their profit? They are paying taxes, and they are already complaining about numerous taxes. I recall that part of the joker of why the federal government is pushing for the tax reform bills is to streamline the taxes that the corporate sector pays from about 49 to maybe about 8 or 9. And until then, this is still in the works. Until then, the complaint is that federal authorities will come, collect tax, states will come, local government will come, and it's eroding the profit margin of the corporate world. And so, while it is a welcome development that there could be a humanitarian trust fund, we cannot, in good conscience, I'm not a business owner, but I want to say that we cannot be too optimistic about their positive response. So government on its own have to be prudent in the management of resources and prioritize humanitarian aids. The heavy lifting hitherto has been done by the UN agencies that are operating here, the UNOPS, the UN Office of Humanitarian Refugee and UNOCHR and the rest of them. But now they have not much resources to spend in Nigeria and 8 other countries. So we just, for government, what I would just advise is that government will have to look at the federation account and set up, maybe that trust fund should not be intergovernmental trust fund, where local government will chip in part of their monthly allocation, the state will chip in, because you can't overload the federal. Federal is carrying the burden of funding security. You know, it's on the exclusive legislative list. Whatever the governors are doing is just on compassionate ground. They are not compelled by the law to support federal institutions, but they are doing it nonetheless. So if you now say you want to put that burden again on the federal government, it might be too much, because different critical sectors are crying for attention. And you know, if you listen to every budget defense, the number one recurring factor is that every minister, every DG, every executive secretary goes to the National Assembly and says, we are not having enough resources to do our work. So where will that resource come from? But we need to prioritize. What I would advise is that the push factor, the causative factors that lead to humanitarian challenges, we need to fix it. If we don't fix it, it's like a leaking roof. If you are mopping a leaking roof, it's not going to stop the leakage. So the best thing is, what are those push factors that made people to be displaced from their ancestral home, from becoming refugees outside of this country? There are hundreds of thousands of Nigerians in Cameroon, in Niger Republic, in Chad. They have not been brought in because it costs a lot to resettle people. And they already, look at the Benue crisis now. It has created another IDP. They have to be fed. And these are people who are contributing to the economy before the crisis. So now they are now depending on aid. And unless government at all levels find it, make a commitment as a priority to stop the security challenge in a way that, you know, and there are plethora of literature on how this can be done. It's just the political will that is lacking. If we don't stop that causative factor that made people to be displaced and to now rely heavily on humanitarian aids, no matter if you put the entire budget of the country on humanitarian aid, it will continue to expand. Because where you have, maybe in the budget you made provision for 200,000 people to give them starter packs, to give them food, to give them whatever. And then less than 2 months into the new year, another crisis broke up. And then you have another 500,000 people displaced. How do you can't continue to play that kind of catch-up.
So which means the bigger challenge before us is dealing with all these causative factors you talked about.
Yeah, it's the best way out.
Well, some might say cutting down humanitarian operations means local teams will need to take on more responsibility. Do you think that the country has capacity to handle that? The staff, do you think they are ready for this shift, staff and organizations involved?
To cut down what?
To cut down on the responsibilities. They will have to take on more responsibilities. That's for the local teams here in Nigeria.
The local teams of the donor or the local teams of the
humanitarian
agency,
organizations,
like National Emergency
yes, like
Management,
the Humanitarian Ministry.
See, Jesus, the truth is that these people don't have elastic prowess or strength. You can't continue to push, do more, do more. Do more with what? If you don't have resources, you can't make a brick without straw. That's the big truth. So you can't say NEMA should do more, SEMA should do more. Don't forget, we have SEMA, which is State Emergency Management Agency. We have NEMA. Now, NEMA is under the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. Kudos to President Bola Tinubu. No, it was actually the commendation should go to immediate past President Muhammadu Buhari, who deemed it fit to have Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. You recall that because that's in his second time he set up this Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and put social investment program under that. But if you don't ensure that this ministry is well resourced, it will continue to grapple, to wobble, and not perform optimally. You cannot recruit people and not pay them. Even volunteers are not paid. So even, I mean, these are people who sign on to be volunteers. You have to motivate them to be able, and don't also forget one critical factor. Humanitarian staff their lives are at risk. Many of them have been killed in crossfire. Even in Nigeria, if you go do a Google check, some humanitarian aid staff have been abducted and murdered. So they themselves have to be very cautious. They cannot be too daring. They have to be motivated. They have to be well resourced in terms of staff, in terms of equipment to work with. And don't forget, when we talk about humanitarian needs, it's not just about insurgency or people getting... What about flooding? We have perpetual flooding challenge, and people will be displaced. Now, look at...
I would like you to hold that thought because we need to take a quick break now. Don't go anywhere. We still have more for you on the program. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Advocate and a published author.
I am the founder of Celebration, a businesswoman, and a fashion icon. I am a wealth coach and a real estate developer.
I am Amaka Rakwe. I'm a corporate commercial lawyer and an entrepreneur.
Welcome to Warhaka. I am Ramatu Shehu Oyibo, an entrepreneur and a business coach.
I am the voice of an average Muslim woman, an hijabite, and a lawyer.
I am a polymath and a serial entrepreneur.
I am Murayo Afolabi Brown, Managing Director, TVC Entertainment. I'm a media consultant, producer, and broadcaster.
The ladies of your view are made of women from different professions, tribes, cultures, and religion. Join us every Monday to Friday as we share our views on topical and social issues.
We're glad to have you back. You're still watching TVC Breakfast, and we're live from our Abuja studio. We're still talking about the decision by the UN to scale down its operations in Nigeria, and we have dissecting this topic with us, Jide Ojo, in the studio. Now, before we went on the break, we were discussing about the fix to these gaps. Can you suggest, since you say these local teams cannot take on more responsibility, that would be overstretching them, what would you say are the quick fixes, or the fixes rather, to fill in these gaps and ensure that Nigerians and displaced persons don't feel that the brunt too much?
Like I said earlier, if we have to do supplementary budgets, we have to do supplementary budgets. These are human beings who, for no fault of theirs, found themselves in IDP camps in need of aid. These are breadwinners. Many of them have very large farms. Many of them have thriving businesses. All of a sudden, because of natural disasters, they now find themselves at a receiving end, having to beg for food, having to cook with firewood, having to depend on handouts. It's traumatizing enough for anybody. Because, you see, we don't appreciate peace until we lose our peace. So, what government needs to do in the immediate period is, I expect the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs to send a memo to the FEC, Federal Executive Council, or seek a private discussion with Mr. President when he comes back to say we have an emergency on our hands. These people that has been helping us are scaling down. Cost benefit, we have to carry our own car. You can't force them to stay. In fact, some of them have even been indicted that they are aiding and abetting insurgents and all of that. I've had military authority talking about some of the, but I don't know how far that's true, because it's their word against that of Human Rights Watch and Amnesty. They have been trading words about whether some of the humanitarian agencies are also involved in fueling insurgency and whatever. But be that as it may, the one that concerns me is the human, the needs of the internally displaced and the refugees. And we need to, as soon as possible, make budgetary provision. The same way the federal government responded to the withdrawal of, or the pause of USAID funding by appropriating 200 billion to offset the payment for health workers who are either to being paid by the U.S. Agency for International Development. And this is becoming glaring now, that much as we've waived what these people do, wave it off with thinking that they don't matter. Now we see that they matter. 200 billion, health workers alone. Now, you are adding humanitarian needs. And we are facing existential challenge in mitigating some of this. Even military aids, they've done a lot in terms of capacity building, in terms of training, in terms of equipment, providing equipment, in terms of food packs and starter packs and resettlement and all of that. So the Federal Executive Council have to meet urgently and, if need be, do a supplementary budget that will cover the cost while the federal government talks with the state and local government, that we cannot carry this alone. After all, the federal government does not have one plot of land out of the entire land mass of Nigeria. They are owned by the state. So the state is where the conflict, where the flooding, where the humanitarian crisis happen. Okay. So the state must also chip in its own bit, and the local government. So if we have to have a funding by the tripartite funding by the three tiers of government, so be it. Then you can now talk about launching humanitarian trust fund, where maybe those organizations, philanthropists, can now still chip in their support to bridge the funding gap.
Mr. Ojo, is it not time for us to now look at how to reduce the leakages in our own system? Now, from the UN, what they said is aimed at enhancing efficiency, responsiveness, and they're having a drawback of their staff.
Yeah.
Now, if we have NEMA, we have SEMA and all that, shouldn't we now take a look at the overhead cost? Because we must find a way to reduce our cost so that we can meet the real humanitarian challenges.
Well, I don't agree with you that we need to reduce our overhead cost. We have been playing behind the scene. The humanitarian agencies have been at the front lines, providing support, and you have to pay humanitarian workers well. You have to give them life insurance. Like I said, some of them, even in the war on Gaza, look at how many aid workers have been killed, including journalists. Was it last week I watched, where they said about 15 journalists were killed in one fell swoop. So it's a very dangerous area to work when you have to go provide succor to people who are victims of violence. If it's victim of flood, you know, it's just about getting them a temporary shelter, food, and all of it. But where you have to go to environment that is volatile, that is dangerous, and you think you pay people peanuts, come and take 100,000 naira, and then you go to front line. They are not trained military personnel. And so you need to pay them well. And that's where I disagree. That
it's not about payments now. Talking about the staff strength. If
yeah, but you need to recruit more. You need to recruit more. Because if the agency that is helping us retrench some of their staff, and obviously they have to do that. In fact, what I read is that they are reducing their staff strength. It then means that the shortfall has to be met by somebody. And you need, because the more there are crises, the more hands have to be on deck to ensure effective and prompt humanitarian support for these people. But don't forget what I said earlier on. Our primary target should be how to halt the causative factors for this crisis, including flooding. They are preventable, are they not? As early as January, February, the rainfall forecast, the flooding, seasonal flooding report has been released by relevant agencies. Why are we not aiding? Why do we perennially have to lose hundreds of billions, farmlands, houses, people to flooding? It's preventable. You know, God so loved Nigeria that we don't even have much of humanitarian crisis. Look at what happened in 2 countries recently, Asian country, where there were, I don't know, was it, I'm trying to remember, where there was earthquake, 7.7 scale earthquake, that people died. One country was able, is it Hong Kong or one country was able to plan for this. So their building code and everything was able to withstand the shock of earthquake. But the other country that was similarly affected, which they were contiguous country, that one suffered a lot of casualty. Now, what I'm saying is that we need, prevention is cheaper and better than cure. Let's deal with the causative factor. Is it flooding you want to tackle? How can we raise awareness? How can we ensure that people don't lose their lives and businesses to flooding? Is it about insurgency? How can we contain them? How can we ensure that more people are not joining these bad gangs to create further problems for the country? Because any country that is not at peace can never develop. Yeah. No matter what. Look at all the infrastructural development the federal government is putting in place. The multi-billion-dollar, infrastructure, road infrastructure, bridges, housing. But if there is no peace, people can't live. People would live. People would be displaced and they will not be able to enjoy those facilities. So that's why we need the coordinated effort to checkmate escalation of crisis, of insecurity. When we are able to do that, we will cut back even on the budget for humanitarian assistance. But if we fail to do that, we will continue to have to budget more resources, personnel, funds, equipment, and all of that, to be able to take care of the victims of this humanitarian crisis. So prevention is better than cure, but nevertheless, it's a challenge the federal government have to rise up to. We have no way of escaping this. You can't persuade these humanitarian agencies to stay unless you are ready to put the resources down. And if you cannot, they will go, but you need to fill the gap.
Of course.
But a lot of thinking through have to be done to checkmate further escalation.
Well, insecurity and displacement keeps getting worse, and now farmers can't even reach their farm to farm, which raises the fear of food insecurity and shortages. At what point should this whole situation be declared as a national emergency?
Now. It's now. Because, you see, it's a ripple. It's like when you drop a pebble in the river, you see the ripple effect. You've just brought another perspective. Food crisis, humanitarian crisis causing food crisis. And that's the way it is. It's not even food crisis alone. It's even trade and investment. Please, let me ask you, Tijesu and Momo, if you are an investor and you have read that this environment is volatile, unless you are going into manufacturing of military hardware and security gadgets, you will flee. You will not bring your investment to an environment where you are most likely going to lose it. And that is why farmers have to be protected. This act of insecurity now, we call Benue food basket of the nation. But those local governments that are affected, where a couple of dozens of people have been mauled in their sleep, can they go back to farm? The people of Plateau, in Bassa, in Bokos, who were affected, where over 100 people were killed, can they go to farm? The people in Zamfara, in Kebbi, in Sokoto, in Katsina, who have, imagine the audacity of even picking up a retired military general. You know, that's to tell you it's a national emergency that needs to be contained. Because if you fail to contain it, no matter the blueprint, the roadmap, the noble plan of Ministry of Agriculture to help farmers, you can't plant in the air. You have to plant on ground. And if the ground is not secure, and let me even shock you, it's an open secret that in many trouble spots where this act of insecurity is very pervasive, the survival strategy of many farmers is to pay access fee to insurgents and bandits, and then when it's time for them to harvest, to also pay harvest fee. It's like in Lagos and Southwest where you pay omonile. You bought a plot of land, you want to build, at the foundational level they come and say we are omonile. Pay us before we allow you to do foundation. Then it gets to the lentil, you pay another sum. You want to do roofing, you pay another. That's what banditry, insurgency, and insecurity has become. So how will food prices not be impacted when the cost of production has been exponentially increased? Because you pay access fee, no matter we've read where Bello Toji would say, this community, I need 200 million for you to farm. Imagine a poor peasant farmer who have to pay, because I don't know what the population of that place will be, to go and, gather that huge sums of money to pay a bandit or leader of a bandit group. How would they make profit on their effort if not to transfer the cost on the consumer? So that is why we need government at all levels, because this is a federalism. Much as we want to call out the president, we want to call out federal government, the state also gets their own allocation. The local government gets their own allocation. And they must work in a collaborative and coordinated manner to solve this problem of insecurity, which leads to displacement of people, which now warrants intervention of humanitarian agencies.
We must thank you so much for your time with us on the program this morning. Your contributions were quite insightful. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Well, at the end of the day, happy Easter. At the end of the day, it goes beyond, government policies and programs. These are real people that are facing real life issues, and just a lot needs to be done, a lot of more responses, because the choices that are made right now in the country would determine, the quality of lives of these people that are involved. So that's why we'll leave the conversation this morning. We must thank you so much for joining and being a part of it. We'll now hand you over to our Lagos studio, where Veronica and the rest of the crew are standing by to continue with the rest of the show.
All right, thank you, Tijesu and Eshamomo, for that timely conversation. It was necessary to have that at this point. Thank you once again.